Okay. For anyone who missed it and wants to watch it later, it is just an honor and a pleasure to be here with all of you this evening and to celebrate the launch of a new book by Bridget Quinn, who is with us today from sunny California. Her latest book, Portrait of
Very
a
sunny.
Woman, Art, Rivalry, and Revolution in the Life of Adélaïde Labille-Guiard. By the end of this, we'll all be able to say this artist's name correctly. I speak French. Even I struggled to get that one off the tongue.
That's why her name is not in the main title.
Yeah. So this fascinating artist, we'll learn about her this evening. She was a rival of kind of more famous today, Elizabeth Vigée-Lebrun. Hopefully this book will make or start to change that conversation. And we're really excited to learn about this artist and her role as a royal portraitist, her impact as a mentor for emerging women artists during the 18th century, which to me, this moment in history in Paris just baffles my mind. It's hard for me to put myself in this artist's shoes and to truly understand the challenges that she would have faced as a woman, not to mention anyone would have faced with the French Revolution. So it's really just riveting to learn about this story through the amazing prose of Bridget Quinn's book. Now, her book is already been receiving quite a bit of press. It received a starred review in Publishers Weekly, and it has appeared in Hyperallergic. It's been in the Brooklyn Rail, and there's a podcast coming out, The Art of History. So we can share all those details with you after this. And just really an amazing book that bridges the gap and allows us as art historians and those who aren't art historians, for everyone to really appreciate and understand the importance of this woman artist. So without further ado, I want to pass it along this talk this evening to Bridget Quinn. And I'm excited to learn all about this artist as well as the research journey and how we met.
Exactly. Well, first of all, thank you so much. Thank you to Lauren, and thank you everyone for being here tonight or today, depending on where you're from, or 10 o'clock at night. That like blows my mind. I know that that's just dinner time in Portugal, but it's inconceivable to me. I am going to, of course, show images. So I'm going to try to get that started right now.
Oh, let me.
Are you going to share?
For
Are
you.
you going to share and all four? Okay.
I'll make that possible for
These
you.
are the technical difficulties. But you know, I just want to say that I've really admired the community of, you know, art lovers that Lauren has created. And that's, you know, such an essential part of our lives in the world. And it's really a part of the story that I'm going to be telling today. Community is really one of the central themes of the book, and it was one of the central themes of Adélaïde's life, and it's why she was able to have the art career that she did have. And it's also the reason that I was able to write this book. It took me decades. Here's the book, by the way. If you haven't seen it, nice shouty title that you can see even in a thumbnail on your phone. All right, let me try to share my screen. Is it going to work? Yeah. Let's see. Wait, why is mine not? Hold on one second. I'm so old that there used to be students who helped you show slides. You didn't do it yourself. Okay, so you know, writing a book, like almost every human endeavor, is not a solo project, and it took incredible support from my family, from fellow writers, fellow art historians, from my amazing agent, who you're going to hear something about tonight, and the belief of my publishing house, Chronicle Books. This is the third book that I've written about women, that centers women's history and art, and that's really remarkable for mainstream publishing. This is a book for a general audience. I don't think you would find many publishers willing to kind of go to bat for an 18th century French woman artist, or maybe any 18th century artist. So I'm super grateful to them. And while it is the story of this artist, Adélaïde Labille-Guiard, I just want to say that I'm not a native French speaker, and I think I am going to, in the course of the talk, use the Americanization of her name, Adelaide. It's just easier to hear and easier to say. I already made the joke already. That's why the title doesn't lead with her name. It's really a mouthful, even for someone like Lauren, who's fluent in French. So it's a book about this wonderful woman. This is her painting, Portrait of a Woman, the cover of the book. It is not a self-portrait. We don't know who this woman is, but she is captivating. And my favorite part is that she's writing. And the book is really the story of a neighborhood of artists, or it begins as a neighborhood of artists who live near the Louvre, and they help educate and encourage a young woman from the neighborhood who comes from a non-artistic family. This is her pastel, the portrait of the sculptor Augustin Pajou from 1783. So, it's a very unusual story in the history of art. Most women artists in Western history have fathers who are artists or have some connection to the art world. There are exceptions, but it is very rare. It's especially rare that someone like Adelaide was able to rise to the highest ranks of French art. It's also the story, probably the part that I find most compelling, of how this woman, Adélaïde Labille-Guiard, in the center here, in a self-portrait with two pupils. This painting's at the Met, one of probably her most famous work from 1785. How she, in turn, celebrated, supported, and nurtured the next generation of women artists, and how eventually she risked her life during the French Revolution to try to create equality for women artists in France. It is very much the story of friendship and faith and true belief in the necessity of art, really for everyone. And here's my favorite meme from the internet. I don't know where it came from, so I'm sorry if I can't credit the person, but art history should be fabulous, I think. I hope the talk today and the book is as much fun as it is informational. And French art especially, right, is just really fabulous. Actually, I'm going to go back to this one first. So I'm going to start just by reading a little bit from the beginning of the book, just to kind of give the context, and then I'll give a little bit of backstory, and then I hope we can just have a conversation about it. Again, this is Self-Portrait with Two Pupils. And those are two of her female students. Marie-Gabrielle Capet, who was really someone who was her lifetime companion as much as her student, and Marie Carreau de Rosemond. Sorry, the pronunciations. Okay, so do you know the term chiaroscuro? Maybe you remember it from a dusty art history course you took once, or some half-forgotten book, or maybe you know it well, wielding it with pleasure on appropriate occasions. It's a word that feels good in your mouth, chiaroscuro, and it means light and dark. Western painting owes its poetry and high drama to this play of light and dark. And both visually and metaphorically, chiaroscuro is really how we comprehend the world. This meme is a great example, right? Without the devil, there is no God. There's no hero without their antagonist, and no heroine either. And literature knows this, art history too. And so I did choose to, with some reluctance, to tell the story of an underknown painter, Adélaïde Labille-Guiard, alongside the words of a far more famous artist who has long been cast as her rival, Elizabeth Vigée-Lebrun, here in this fabulous, speaking of fabulous, self-portrait in a straw hat. This is in London, absolutely wonderful painting. And I quote liberally from Elizabeth's memoir and letters, her souvenir. It consists of 3 volumes. She published them beginning in 1835 when she was 80, and those volumes were really the toast of Europe. They made her famous. They continue to be something that feeds her fame. Of course, there's her work, but also her words and the picture that she paints of herself. In her memoirs, she celebrates the virtues of her art and person. She is not shy in doing that. Of her friend, Queen Marie Antoinette, of sparkling Paris in the age before revolution and guillotine, and of her marvelous and mostly royal acquaintances across Europe. Of Adelaide, a fellow artist whose name was once routinely linked with hers, Elizabeth doesn't say anything in print beyond one oblique and nameless reference. So calculated oversight as the ultimate shade and omission as fuel for the ash heap of history. You know, of course, that history's ash heap is a metaphorical one, but there were real ashes too. Adelaide's most ambitious canvas, a mammoth multi-figure history painting, was burned in a Paris public square on a warm summer night in 1793. It was a bonfire of art thronged by cheering crowds. Adelaide never fully recovered from her losses that night. This is a painting done of her friend, the painter Francois-André Vincent from 1795, so after the burning of her painting. And she died just 10 years later. When that happened, her status as a celebrated French artist was already endangered. She had acquired a new married name, Vincent's here, and it was one that was entirely unconnected with the names that she had used as a painter in Paris before and during the French Revolution. And yeah, I'm sure you know this, but while the revolution sought social advancement in so many arenas, it enacted reforms that really restricted women's rights, both in public and in private. And all of these factors meant creeping amnesia about an artist who had once thrived at the center of French art. I love this painting. It's her portrait of Madame Genlis, 1780, and it's one of the rare paintings really that we have on the West Coast. It's in the LA County Museum of Art. When I say rare, I mean rare 18th and earlier painting, at least in my part of California for sure. When I was a young woman, recovering the thread of Adelaide's life and work felt like a really astonishing, if private act of inspiration. Encountering Adelaide at age 22 changed the course of my life. And now that I'm a middle-aged woman with women's liberty under siege in my own country and in the world, remembering Adelaide feels essential. Her life is an object lesson in how women's rights have been suddenly reversed before and how women's are often forgotten. And what's more, she offers a counter narrative to the notion of women at war with each other. You know, in this kind of battle for position as the only exceptional woman of an era. Her manufactured rivalry with Elizabeth was the hot take of its time, and its titillating aura persists, but Adelaide celebrated the achievements of other women along with her own, and I think such solidarity and also self-belief offers its own inspiration. So I first encountered Adelaide's work in the fall of 1990. The summer before, at age 21, I'd moved to New York City, where I'd always wanted to live. Here's me with my little brother, growing up on the Montana plains, when I'd look to stories like Harriet the Spy and From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil Frankweiler, I hope you've all read those, to find myself a nerdy girl in pursuit of freedom and culture. My house was over that hill behind the Ayrshire Dairy billboard, and I lived next to that dairy. So you can imagine being in New York was, yeah, a thrilling change. Here's the main street at the time that I lived in Great Falls, and here is where I went to graduate school, the Institute of Fine Arts, which was just down the street from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. This is the lecture hall where I had all of my classes outside of seminars at the Institute. And I really like this picture because it shows the Met on the screen. So the Met was just a few doors down. And the Met was the place in Where the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil Frankweiler, where Claudia Kincaid hid out with her little brother, uncovering art historical secrets within the museum's vast unfurling halls. And I arrived at age 21 intending to earn a PhD in art history from the Institute, which is what we all called it, a place as vaunted and cult-like as that sounds. I was really still learning how to assert intellectual equality with the pedigreed students I shared seats with when I found myself in a seminar on 18th century French art. And on the first day of class, we picked personal research topics to carry us through the semester. Within minutes, my savvy classmates had scooped up everyone I had ever heard of. And I sat there uncomfortable in uneasy silence with no idea on what topic I would choose when my professor flipped a slide into the projector and up came this painting, Self-Portrait with Two Pupils. This is a woman artist, our professor said, who had somehow lived through the revolution, and her terrific self-portrait had ended up across the street. And he gestured across Fifth Avenue toward the Met, and I raised my hand. For the next 5 years, I made near daily to Adelaide's monumental canvas at the Met, a ritual that became as instinctive and necessary as brushing my teeth. After so long, over 3 decades, of course, I can't remember exactly when I first saw her up close, but I do remember what we wore. Here she is, Adelaide, sky blue gown, folds shimmering with reflected light, white lace framing a stunning display of décolletage, big white bow between her breasts like a happy present. Atop powdered curls was a straw hat beribboned in more celestial blue and spouting ostrich feathers. Pale and pointed slippers peeked out from beneath her dress. Her left foot rested along the bottom rung of an easel, claiming it, while her hands were filled with half a dozen paintbrushes, a long maul stick, and broad palette. Frothy, fabulous, and oddly fierce. Me? Black cropped Levi's, a motorcycle jacket. Sullen, agitated. I couldn't find a photograph of me in the jacket, but the night before my book launch, my college roommate, who's in the center, sent me this picture of us. I was 21, and I see that I love this picture because I'm wearing a Edvard Munch The Scream t-shirt, which just seemed hilariously on brand. And actually, the leather jacket that I used to wear in New York also had Edvard Munch's The Scream on the back. So here I am. And it's hard to remember what had me wound so tight, but visiting Adelaide helped. And from the first, like any hardcore fan, I couldn't get enough of her. I stalked every sketch, pastel, painting, and possible attribution. A mad sense of duty egged me on. She was an artist who promoted other women artists, and I wanted to do the same for her. I wrote my qualifying paper on Adelaide in pursuit of the PhD I have not yet, and later devoted a chapter to her in my first book. But there was so much more that needed saying. I knew it, and I felt she knew it too. As I grew older, I sensed her disappointment, like a ghost in the room or in my heart. I'm 56 now, 2 years older than Adelaide was when she died. And over the decades since we first met, I have been visited by her in ways big and small, ways unsettling and ridiculous. She enters my dreams and my waking thoughts. She leaves me messages on stickers, t-shirts, and museum wall labels. She winks at me from the most unexpected places, and she's demanded my presence on multiple occasions. On her behalf, I've spent a fortune on out-of-print books, not all in English, and pricey university publications just to see if she is mentioned. I followed her across the country and out of the country on quests for which I often had neither time nor money. But I needed to view a painting, see an exhibition, get a glimpse of Adelaide once more. And like a pilgrim tracking down the arm bone of a saint, I needed to commune with her. Several times I started to write her story, born in 1749 and all the rest. I began in the official, biographical, or art historical ways, but she pushed my hand away. I tried other tacks, memoir, essays, fiction, and felt her annoyance once more. I gave up, restarted, gave up again. But as they say, resistance is futile, and that is how I find myself quoting Star Trek in a story about 18th century French art. I relinquish control. Jesus, take the wheel. Or in this case, Adelaide. Having spent the majority of my adult life with her, I like to think that at this point we are on a first name basis. Unlike Elizabeth, Adelaide didn't write the story of her life. She never wrote her memoirs or much of anything, including personal letters to loved ones. She left no diary. Instead, what we have from Adelaide's hand are her paintings, pastels, and drawings, which themselves have plenty to reveal. And so I approached Adelaide's story yet again. But this time, first I waited as much as researched. I went quiet, looking and listening for the centuries-long dead, who reached across the veil of time and space and pointed, whispered, led. They had stories to tell me, stories of lives hinted at in art and other places. There can be no scholarly footnotes for the conjuring of informed imagination, but in Adelaide's case, without imagination, there's only silence, which I can no longer abide. So here I began, Adelaide's voice, more than 2 centuries after her death. So that concludes the reading part of my talk. Just a little glimpse of what it was that got me to start writing the book after so long, after 3 decades. I'm not a character in this story. That's just from the introduction. The rest is Adelaide's life. But you know, as a writer, I know that I enjoy kind of hearing how the sausage is made and peeking a little bit behind the scenes. And because many of you here know Lauren, I thought I might share a little bit of backstory about the book, at least one part of it. So this is the portrait of Joachim Le Breton from 1795, and he was a minister of arts, and he was Adelaide's eulogist when she died at age 52. Is that right? 54. And it's also in the United States at the Nelson Atkins Museum. So yeah, I feel a kind of connection to him, I guess I'd say, because after 30 some years of thinking about this book and wanting to write it, I finally had a contract to begin a book about Adélaïde Labille-Guiard. And man, was I stoked, because what does that mean? It means I get to go to Paris. Yes, it's going to be so awesome. And unfortunately, though, I got the contract in the spring of 2020, and I think you all know what that means. So I spent the first couple of years researching from home. Like I said in the introduction, I had many, many, many books acquired over the years. The internet is truly an amazing thing. I also had help with a researcher in France. But there really is no substitute for the place itself. And so when I was nearly done with the first draft, the person who encouraged this book somehow and landed us the most unlikely book deal about an obscure 18th century artist, or obscure outside the world of art history, said, "You have to go to Paris and I want to come with you." And I said, "Great." And that person was my agent and my friend, Danielle Svetkop. And Danielle, while I had my head down writing, did a little research and came up with the most wonderful local art historian to help us navigate the world of Paris, and especially Versailles and the Louvre. Lauren on the right and me on the left, in full what we were doing mode, me taking pictures and listening to what she had to say. And here, I think, Lauren, we're at the Palais Royal. And some things you told me made their way directly into the book and helped me envisage one of the scenes. So, you know, it really was a magical, magical visit in my opinion. And I was so excited to go. It was my first, I think it was the first time I was on an airplane since COVID started. And yeah, I couldn't wait. Danielle and I decided, since advances are no longer what they once were, that part of our economizing would be that we would share a room. And I was a little bit nervous about this, because even though I love my agent and we are friends truly, it's really different sharing a room with someone, you know, like in a foreign country for a week. So, you know, you have your weird habits, like as an adult, like maybe just say like wearing an eye mask to bed or something that you might not want someone to know. Anyway, I made my peace with it. I thought I would be fine. And then we got there. And this was the room with a double bed, 2 double beds that we had requested. Um, so I got there before Danielle, and I said, "Oh, I mean, I've seen this kind of bed before, of course, but it was always when I was traveling with my husband." So I said, we are not a couple. We're two single women. And he's like, oh yes, but see, can you see the cursor when I roll it over? Maybe not, but you can see it's two mattresses. It's fine. But as you can maybe see here, it's really in one frame and there's a wall. So it was very close. It was a close and very sweet time that we had together in Paris. And it was fine. I slept great, actually. And breakfast was fantastic, as you might imagine. There's Danielle waving at us. And the very next morning, we met Lauren for the first time in person, and we went to Versailles. And these are the curators who met them there. I found a picture where it's not their faces, because protect the innocent in this case. But it was truly magical to be able to go into back rooms of Versailles to see an incredible chapel, for example. They took us, of course, to see the paintings that were on view of Adelaide's. There's me taking a picture. But I think the most exciting thing for me was when they brought pastels out of storage for us to look at. These are two portraits of the Madame, who were King Louis XVI's aunts, and the great patrons of Adélaïde Labille-Guiard. And there are two very large portraits of these two women on view in Versailles. But to see the pastels up close was really, really magical, especially because, pastel, the artist is really touching the surface, and there was just this feeling of intimacy. I was just incredibly moved, and I was, taking pictures with my camera of all the little sections of it. And at one point, I suddenly remembered that Madame Adelaide, this is Princess Adelaide, and I were exactly the same age in these pictures. So we are both 52, and yeah. I had a moment of self-reckoning also from 22 to 52 when my picture was taken with Princess Adelaide. After that, we were taken to the archives, which was also just really wonderful. I was on the side, I'm taking the picture on the side that this notebook is facing us, and I don't have a picture of Lauren, but she was sitting across from me, and we went through all these files and took pictures. And Danielle was with us. I can't speak for Lauren, and I'm sure, and she's done much more of this kind of work than I have, but it was really thrilling to be there, and it was exciting. There really weren't any. I was hoping to find the amazing document. There really wasn't anything like that, but it was just still so fun. I mean, look at that great French handwriting. Danielle was really into it. She she has a scholar's heart. Um, so don't worry, I'm not going to show you any more pictures of my trip to Paris, or our visits to the Louvre, to Adelaide's neighborhood, to the churches that were associated with her life and other significant spots. I really just love this picture. And I hope that you enjoy the book that came from it as much as Danielle enjoyed visiting the archives at Versailles, at least that much. But I'm not going to end here. I have total permission to show this photo, by the way. I want to end instead at Père Lachaise. For several days, I had hoped that we might be able to locate, though I had tried in every archival and other ways that I could think of to locate the final resting spot of Adélaïde Labille-Guiard. I knew she wasn't at Père Lachaise. She dies the year before. But I had hoped to find people who were close to her. Here's me in full Nancy Drew mode, scraping with a pencil on a piece of paper the surface of a headstone, and you can see it says Capet. So her student and companion, and Vincent is nearby. So I didn't find Adelaide's final resting place. And, we don't always get the endings that we hope for in writing or in life, but the journey can be incredible. And it has been an incredible journey for me to live my adult life alongside this incredible artist. And I hope that you get the chance and are inspired to look into her life in my work or elsewhere. And that is all.
That's incredible to hear the backstory from your days at the Institute and frequenting the Met to see that painting on a regular basis and getting to know that one work so intimately. And I think it really shows the importance as art historians, our our connection with the work, seeing a work can completely change our perception of it. And this is something that my advisor always encouraged me to go and see a work. And sometimes I wondered why I was making these crazy pilgrimages to random places to go through, the museum storage. But I've always uncovered really interesting, unexpected facts that have completely, in some cases, have altered the way that I've perceived a work and then written about it. Did your direct experience with seeing any of these works, either in Paris or in the US, did that direct contact with anything? Did that shift your thinking in any way as you were on this journey?
That's a great question. I can't agree with you anymore. I grew up in Montana and then went to undergraduate at UC Santa Barbara. And so most of the work that I saw in the canon until I moved to New York was through reproduction. And I had thought reproductions were great, like, oh, a slide has so much clarity. And I think we can think that even more with the internet, that we can really, hone in on some small part of it, but it is not the same as being in the presence of the work itself. And scale, especially, is impossible to convey. So the first time I really felt it, I mean, I encountered Adelaide for the first time. I had that momentary slide experience with Robert Rosenblum in the seminar, but it was, maybe a day later that I first encountered the work in person. But even so, the first time I saw the portrait of Madame Adelaide, the one of the tall older woman in the red gown with the Corinthian columns around her, I saw that in person at the National Gallery of Art in a show in Washington, D.C., and it just absolutely blew my mind how big it is, and that it is clearly a history painting, that it's a portrait, but it is a history painting, and how she makes it very clear that that is her intention. There is an entire narrative inserted into it. I mean, you have the exact same experience as you do in front of any 18th century history painting in front of that portrait. And I also felt that way a little bit when we were in Versailles seeing the portraits there. They're very large in a way that is uh, overwhelming and monumental and um, immersive. That's impossible to convey in reproduction.
And I love that, in terms of 18th century portraiture, you know, and history painting, maybe we should just quickly clarify for those without the art history background, just how important history painting was for artists at this time in France and in Europe. And women were largely kept out in various ways from tackling this medium. Kind of curious what that then shows as like her ambitions, and through through the medium of, she's through working through the subject of portraiture, and yet maybe pushing that limit into history painting.
Entirely pushing the limit. I mean, entirely pushing the limit at a time when not only are women not really allowed to do history painting, so history painting is, just in terms of French in the Royal Academy, the Académie Royale, there's a hierarchy of genres. So the very top is history painting, then portraiture. I don't remember what exactly it is, but it's like portraiture, still life, landscape, genre, whatever that mix is below portrait. But women are not really able to ascend to history painting because they're not allowed to, well, this is disputed in current scholarship, but it's always been felt, and it was de facto true, that women did not have access to the nude, so they couldn't create these multi-figure compositions in the way that, you know, so much of academic training was studying from the nude. There's been a lot of work recently showing how women got around that, how they did have the ability to study the nude, and that's why you have people like Labille-Guiard, or I think there's a Angelica Kaufman show in London right now, or Vigée Lebrun, that they are able to push into those places. But A, they're not supposed to, and B, it's a way of saying I'm this important at a time when women are not supposed to be doing that, and not supposed to be doing it in public, especially. So it's not just bad form for a woman to be doing it, but it's eventually kind of dangerous. Not kind of, it is dangerous.
And like maybe provide more, what are the dangers? I mean, it's incredible what this artist was doing. I mean, she was living in one of those studio apartments in the Louvre to
Eventually, yeah.
yeah, and what were the dangers, I guess, in the 18th century?
Well, the dangers could be everything from your reputation, right? That you would be assailed in public, which she absolutely was, as was Vigée Lebrun. They were called, you know, sluts. They were sleeping with their sitters. I mean, one of the kind of amusing, it's not that amusing, but one of the funny things is that sometimes they're accused both of having a sexual relationship with the sitter and of not being the person to have done the painting. So uh, you know, somebody else did this painting because it's so good, and she's having sex with the guy in the painting. So they can't win. And some of them are really, really mean. I mean, one point, Vincent, which sounds like 2000 in French, and is the name of her friend and teacher, Francois-André Vincent. There's this sort of ribald verse that is publicly passed out at the show, at the salon where her work is on view, saying that she has Vincent as her lover and Vincent lovers. So she's sleeping with Vincent, and she's sleeping with 2,000 other lovers. So you could have your morals, your person assailed, but by the time of the revolution, feminists are being executed. Olympe de Gouges is executed, and so are other many outspoken women writers, especially. So it is really dangerous. And David, who is kind of the rival of Vincent, basically names names and says that Adelaide is causing trouble in the academy and needs to be stopped at a time when that meant execution. So
Wow.
it's the gamut.
That's really interesting. And very interesting that just all of the dynamics going on and how things are rapidly
I mean,
revolution
yeah,
and
like what could be more just crazy? You know, Versailles meets revolution is going to be some crazy, dangerous, backstabbing stuff, and it's crazy.
wow.
And a lot of people died, as we know.
Yeah. 17,000 or something at the guillotine.
Yeah.
Um,
Vincent's sister is executed. I mean, other women artists were executed. It's amazing. David lived through the revolution too, really.
wow. So can you kind of paint a picture for us of Adelaide's world in Paris as she lived it? I had the privilege of walking through Paris with you as we explored where she would have lived. Of course, many of those streets don't exist anymore, but we did find like near Rue Sainte-Anne, the area, general vicinity where she would have lived. So we were able to find certain places. And were you able to kind of gather in your mind just her whereabouts and her everyday life in Paris as an artist?
Well, the two things that really struck me, one was, you know, for a person like me who doesn't live in Paris, I think of Paris as 19th century Paris with the wide boulevards and the big open streets. And I know that's not the case, but that's my mental picture of Paris. And to go and visit the street where she had grown up and how medieval it still was, how narrow those streets are, and how I had a completely different feeling for it. Like, oh, it wasn't like artists in 19th century Paris. It was like medieval Paris. It was teeming, was the feeling I had. And it made it much more understandable to me how she had a direct experience of art, that the street and the home, they were together, like there were so many people on top of each other. I mean, the Louvre itself was that way too. It was really these warrens of studios and artists apartments. um, and how close the Louvre is to that neighborhood. It really painted a different picture for me of how lively and kind of jumbled together life would have been. It made it much more understandable to me
For
that she
me,
had that exposure, that she knew these people, that she knew these families, you know?
yeah, it was really wonderful to walk through this area of Paris where I had lived before in this arrondissement, in this particular area, and to see it kind of through an 18th century lens. But the Palais Royal really gives you that 18th century aura still
Definitely.
thing.
But
And
something you said about the Palais Royal, like when I see the facade of the Palais Royal, it's so formed and formal. And I don't remember what you were talking about. I think gambling, and I had a much different sense of like, oh, there were prostitutes and gamblers and soldiers, and it was teeming the way a Gothic cathedral would have been filled with, I don't know, goats and like things you just don't like, people doing lifetime things like that. What seems very formal and staid now was alive with living and all kinds of life and all stations of life. It just gave me a different feeling for what her life was.
yeah, not prim
Because I
and
think we can
proper.
get caught, yes, exactly. We can get caught up in the artifice of the 18th century, especially what's presented in paintings. But then just remember, like, these are people who, there's a line in Vigée Lebrun's memoirs where she's with another artist, a young woman, and they're going into the Louvre to take a sketching class with someone, and they buy like a pot of stew on their way in at the gate to have for lunch. Like someone had set up a little side hustle or something, to that you could buy a little food before you went in. And I just loved that. Like, oh, it was life. It was life. And art was life. It wasn't this, like, even our idea of the Louvre, right, as this exalted um, hierarchy of what is great in human culture. It was just human culture. Like you can read things about overflowing latrines and people cooking things that bug their neighbors, and it's fun.
That's amazing. It's like the food stands now in
Exactly.
front of the Louvre. Of course, when she was there, it wasn't a museum yet until later
Right.
in her lifetime, but that must have been epic. I've always dreamed of going back in time to that period and exploring the Louvre as an artist, being able to supposedly lift off the paintings off the wall and to
Yeah.
really, it was, what did you find out about this place while she was there? And or what did you imagine? Because there are so many details that are lacking.
Well, one thing I want to say that it should be obvious, and it's the example of why you have to be somewhere. So the royal salon will be held in the Salon Carré, that like little, that one square gallery. And I've seen multiple etchings. It was a like a common thing, or to have an etching of whatever that year's paintings were. I mean, it's one of the great documents that we have from the royal salons, is we know exactly where everything hung because of these amazing etchings. But of course, to get a picture of it all, it's done in this kind of fisheye. Some artists might have to help me here, but like a fisheye view, so you can see all the paintings on all the walls. And I didn't know, I just didn't realize how small that space is. It's not that small, but I mean small for all those paintings, and how high the walls are. So salon paintings are famously skied, right? Like so they'll be salon hangs, you know, where from the floor to the ceiling, there's paintings and like this crazy quilt of canvases all the way to the ceiling. And you can know that and you can see these etchings, but to be in the room and realize like, man, you can barely back up far enough to even see the top paintings. It just had a completely different effect on me once I had that picture. And that really helped me envision a scene inside that room, like what it would be like to be from the etchings. Even we know there were like dogs and small children and, you know, all kinds of different people on top of each other, backing up, trying to look at art. And that's just fun for me to think of. But the accounts of life inside the Louvre, I mean, it wasn't fancy. It was artist quarters. And also, you know, maybe if you were a military person who got a certain kind of honor, I don't mean like a general, I mean something, you know, some nice retirement thing, you might get lodging in the Louvre. So there were people who had nothing to do with each other culturally in some ways, but mostly artists. And there was all the things that you'd have with any of your normal neighbors, but artists. So just imagine like the kind of things you can read about people's irritation with each other and what they're doing in their business, who's passing down their apartment to who's illegally has their son-in-law and daughter living with them, you know, et cetera, et cetera. It's just, it's fun. It's like a soap opera when you read that stuff.
And which female artist, you know, has been given a place there? Were there other women living in the Louvre, women artists?
Well, there's other women because there
Yeah.
are the wives and daughters of artists. Um, Vigée Lebrun does not, so far as I can tell, ever ask for lodging in the Louvre. She lives very well. Her husband's an picture dealer. Um, but in addition to Adelaide, Anne Vallier-Costet has an apartment in the Louvre.
Okay.
But she's the only other one I can think of. I mean, there are people who are part of the Royal Academy who are women who are married to Royal Academicians, so they might have had lodging in the Louvre. But Adelaide asks for well over a decade. Her due as being a member of the Royal Academy is to have lodging, and she's rebuffed year after year after year, and finally does achieve it, but pretty late, and doesn't really move in until her painting's been burned, and things are definitely on the downhill slide for her.
Wow. You do mention, well, Vigée Lebrun, her memoirs are very important, and I'm interested in how she discussed other women artists in her memoir, if that's a topic that she broaches.
She does a couple of places. Mostly she doesn't. She does a couple of places. She mentions Angelica Kaufman. I mean, it is very telling that she doesn't mention the one by name, the one person with whom she was routinely linked in the press and criticism, as part of both being female painters to the royal court. Her, you know, this is one of the things with biography, that people very often want a primary source document, which a memoir is a kind of primary source. But, you know, people lie. They lie by lies, they lie by obfuscation, they lie by just their own point of view is not necessarily clear. But they also lie in letters to their friends, in their own diaries to themselves. So things have to be taken with a grain of salt. But in the case of Vigée Lebrun, there are things that are not just omissions. They are like, they're lies. But there are also grave omissions. And cutting out Labille-Guiard is definitely one of them. But she does mention other women that she studied with when she was young. One artist who I can't think of her name, Bouquet. I can't think of the first part of her name, but she was she has a famous portrait of Benjamin Franklin in Philadelphia, one that we've all seen before, and she was executed during the Revolution. So she brings her up, but really as an example of her being executed later and having given up her art only to have that happen. Oh yeah, Michelle Jones, hi. Oh yeah, even as a founding artist. Okay, so there's a Kaufman show in London right now. at the Royal Academy. And Michelle says that even as a founding artist of the Royal Academy, she wasn't allowed to sit for the group portrait or to join nude studies, right? And and Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the portrait of the founding members of the Royal Academy, she and another woman are depicted in portraits hanging on the wall, but they're not actually in it. I hope I come to London too. Yes, they're on the wall. so, so there was this way that women were occasionally allowed into these Royal Academies. Rosalba Carriera, the Italian artist, was also a member of the French Academy, but it's like honorary. She came to Paris. They said, "Oh, we make you a member of the Royal Academy now," and then she goes home. That's ideal. And occasionally they let in the wives, the daughters. But what's remarkable about both Vigée Lebrun and Labille-Guiard is that they are both women without connection within the Royal Academy, at least in terms of kin. Of course, Labille-Guiard has many friends in the Royal Academy, including Vincent. I hope I come to London too. I really want to. I saw also a question about who is considered a better painter and why. Oh, that's a great question. What does better mean, I guess, is one of the questions. From the beginning and even now, they're very often compared in terms of Vigée Lebrun being this kind of amiable flatterer, a kind of with lovely feminine guile in how she depicts people, and Labille-Guiard being sort of virile and masculine and able to handle the form. So almost like form versus color. All of these seem a little slippery to me. I think in both cases, they were both very great artists and sometimes uneven, which is the case of most artists. But if you see some of Vigée Lebrun's best work, they're incredible. They're gorgeous. And she does have a lot of like really sentimental, sappy, not so great. What was your primary source? Oh, sorry, this is maybe a direct message to me? Should I answer this separately? Yes or not if I should talk to everyone. Okay, so the question is, what was your primary source of info on Adelaide since she left no memoirs or letters? She does leave some letters. There are letters. So the original monograph on Adélaïde Labille-Guiard is in French by Anne-Marie Passé, who I think is still alive. Do you know, Lauren, if she is or not? At any rate, she did all of the kind of primary original research and has an amazing, what do they call that? Section in the back of kind of appendices of primary documents, but they're so sparse. Like there are a few letters requesting lodging in the Louvre. There's a letter to the Countess d'Angevilliers asking her to protect her from these libelous pamphlets that are being circulated about her. And there's her last will and testament. But she lived in Paris her entire life. And we don't have any kind of like cache of letters between her and loved ones or her and her family. She was the 8th child of a family where everyone in her family died young, including her mother, and her father lived to a kind of reasonable age. But so we just don't have the kind of documents that you would have from someone who was writing to her siblings, her sister who's married, or her even friends in a nearby town. Or maybe we just don't know that where they are. Like it's certainly possible, since she was kind of overlooked. And then there's also another book, and I can't lay my hands on it, from 2009 by Laura Arricchio, that has a great deal of updated information. And then there are people who are constantly posting things online of original documents, whether baptismal documents or the eulogy, for example. Yeah, so there are primary sources. There just isn't very much from her own hand. And I to the point where I question how much education she may have had. It's very likely she didn't have a lot. Why was she more overlooked than Lebrun? Well, for many reasons. One is have you ever heard, whoever tells the story of history gets to tell it the way they want to? Well, Labille-Guiard dies at the age of 54, and already has seen a decline in her reputation. So after being kind of at the center of what made French art great, she has to keep her head down, to keep her head during the revolution. And when her painting is burned in 1793, well, I shouldn't say this. I shouldn't say it like that's what makes it happen. Her eulogist, Le Breton, says something like, she never recovered from that night. And she died of a long illness. And he sort of makes a connection between the two. Whether that's true or not, we don't know what illness it was that killed her, but it's clear that she suffered for a long time and didn't make very much art after the revolution. So that's one reason. She's kind of, that thread is sort of lost. Vincent, who she marries at the very end of her life, his heirs try to donate her works to the Louvre, and they are rebuffed. They say, there's no room in our collection of this work of zero merit, of no merit. The Met now has one of those paintings, and it's considered one of the greatest paintings in their world-class 18th century collection. So there is this feeling, okay, I've gone in several directions, but there's a feeling very often in history, and even now you can see it with maybe Beyonce versus Taylor Swift, that there can be one woman who is the exceptional woman. And Vigée Lebrun lives the longest, and she writes a 3-volume memoir where she kind of creates a persona that she has created throughout her life in her art and with her words that is extremely persuasive and delightful. And she is embraced as the great 18th century French woman artist, and everyone else falls away. So that's that is saying goodbye to those who need to go.
The other point there, to take that forward through the 19th and even the early 20th century, is repetition. So women artists, critical reviews really help to reinforce an artist's career in France through the 19th century, 18th, 19th, early 20th century. And again, when a female artist comes to the fore, they're always compared with a great woman artist from the past. And so Vigée Lebrun's name comes up again and again and again. And then eventually like Berthe Morisot is going to become the star and everyone's compared to her. And so it becomes this repetitive cycle. And it's, as you said, just kind of one exception. One woman artist can have the spotlight for that century, you know.
And Audrey asks or says, what about their patrons? Did that make a difference? Yes, for sure, because the patron of Lebrun is Marie Antoinette, who is everyone's favorite figure of the 18th century, whether she's your favorite figure that you love to hate or your favorite figure that you love to love. So she has that proximity to that glittering interest. Labille-Guiard is the painter to these sort of matronly spinster aunts that are not very sexy to history. So yeah, that makes a huge difference. And Vigée Lebrun did many, many paintings of Marie Antoinette. So she's reproduced quite a bit more. If anyone hasn't seen Michelle's comment, the Louvre, we will take 2,498 tablets from Egypt, but there is no room for this woman's painting, for a woman's paintings. Oh, was Lebrun's work group? Yeah. Why was she more overlooked than Lebrun? I hope I answered that. I'm not positive. Lebrun's work was also burned. Yes. The difference is that so many works were burned that evening in Paris. So this is not a singular experience that Labille-Guiard had, but she had pinned 8 years of work on this one painting. This was going to solidify her position as an important French academic painter. It was the thing that would bring her to the highest pinnacle of French genres, where Vigée Lebrun was not. Everything rested on this painting, and to see that burned, it would be like if I finished writing my book and then we burned it and no one ever got to see it. You know, it would be devastating. or with that story of Hemingway's wife leaving his manuscript on the train. You know, it's like, it's bad. Also, I don't think I said this, but Vigée Lebrun flees Paris shortly after the fall of the Bastille. Basically, she is very smart and sees the writing on the wall, and she gets out. And what she does is she goes to Italy and then to Vienna and then to Russia, and she paints emigres from France, nobility across Europe. And so she spreads her fame and spreads her delightful persona to all of these extremely influential and wealthy communities across Europe. It's an excellent way to seed your reputation and then seal it with a fabulous memoir talking about how great it was to party with these beautiful people and how wonderful they all were. I mean, there's nothing in the entire memoir that isn't wonderful. Everything is wonderful and beautiful, and except the revolution, of course. But I mean, yeah, better marketer, 100%. I mean, you only have to look at that self-portrait to see what an unbelievable, I mean, I'm going back. Hold on, I'm trying to see if I can show my, I mean, here's an example. Vigée Lebrun is maybe best known for her portraits with her daughter. I don't have a reproduction of one. Okay, let's see if I can share my screen again. So here's Labille-Guiard. She's a bit of a realist, right? This is the person who will be her late in life husband, who has been her lifelong friend, who is the reason she is able to take up oil painting, the reason she's able to become a member of the Royal Academy. And it's not flattering, I wouldn't say. It's not even ennobling. I find it very beautiful and moving. But this is a man who has lived through hard times. He's lived through the revolution and who is still tenacious in his work. Here's Vigée Lebrun's self-portrait. I mean, she's a movie star. She looks fantastic. She is completely in control of her image, of her art. It is self-portrait as starlet, and it's extremely lovely and persuasive. And so imagine your Marie Antoinette, who was not famously beautiful, that she can do this for you is pretty great. And also, if I'm a minor nobility in Naples, I'm pretty stoked to have that happen for me too. So she's an absolute masterful marketer. And so I was going to say about her daughter, she has these very famous paintings, probably her most famous, of her with her daughter Julie, you know, hugging or kind of like cuddling up to her, and they look like Instagram influencers, just gorgeous. And I mean, believe me, Mother's Day is around the corner. We're all going to be seeing reproductions of her portraits of herself with her daughter Julie. But the reality is, Julie marries an unsuitable man, or a man that her mother doesn't like. Her mother cuts off all contact with her. She ends up back in Paris, Julie, penniless, eventually abandoned by her husband, and dies alone of syphilis. So she's a great marketer, but she wasn't a great mother, probably. You know, that's what marketing is. It's persuasive, and she was a genius at that. I don't really want to end on that bummer note. We can possibly turn it around somehow. How's this? Labille-Guiard is the opposite, right? She cultivates the next generation of women artists. She tries to find places for them to exhibit. When the Royal Academy creates an absolutely, instead of an unofficial cap of 4 women allowed at any time, an actual rule that there can be no more than 4 women at any time, and that they have to be admitted by unanimous vote. When that happens, she paints her self-portrait with 2 pupils. I'm gonna try and find it and share my screen again. With 2 of her pupils at the Royal Salon. So she basically says to the entire Royal Academy, you're saying there can't be more than 4 women at a time on the walls of the salon? Okay. And then she puts 2 more women artists on the walls of the salon. So she's a different kind of marketer, but in her own day, that made actual political change happen. And to me, that's why her story is so important and why it still resonates today. Her art is important for itself, but the story of someone, really willing to do the hard things and stand up for other women and stand up for women in her field and to not play the game that is necessary to win um, the role of one exceptional woman. That is something I still find inspiring, and I still find a really hopeful message. And she's still here and being reproduced more and more, being collected more and more. The Getty just paid a huge sum for one of her pastels. The wheel is turning. Angelica Kaufman has a giant show in London, and I've been hearing rumor. I don't know, Lauren, if you've heard anything more, that there is going to be a Vigée Lebrun show at Versailles. We'll see. We'll see.
They're totally keeping it secret.
I know. I keep hearing that.
Have to keep you in the loop. I know Karine is here. She's a colleague of mine, a fellow guide in Paris. So if she's still with us, it's like midnight Paris time. But
Yeah.
I'll
Well, if
ask
anyone
all the
hears anything, let
guides.
me know.
Keep
I mean,
our
I think
ears out.
also you can plan an exhibition and not be able to get loans. Anything can happen. It's not nefarious. It's just difficult. It's very difficult.
What about this painting that you still haven't seen in
Oh, in
concept?
Quimper. Yeah. Are you going to take me?
Yeah, let's go.
I
I
mean,
haven't been
I
there.
want to go. No, me either. So the cover, Portrait of a Woman, is held by the Musée des Beaux-Arts in Quimper. I've never been. I would love to see it. I feel like it's her only major work I haven't seen. So I gotta go. I gotta go. And if anyone else has seen it, it's almost as much reproduced as Self-Portrait with Two Students. It's often used as in like, I think I mentioned in the book that it was the cover of the Penguin edition of Mary Wollstonecraft's Declaration of the Rights of Women, or Vindication of the Rights of Women. Um, I think Dina Goodman used it as the cover of her book about being a woman of letters in 18th century women of letters. I can't lay hands on it very quickly, but at any rate, an important painting I have not seen yet. Yay, I'll go to France. I think I need to do that.
Do you think that there might be, I mean, this is an impossible question answer, but do you think that there might be another painting or pastel of hers that's unearthed
For
in
sure.
collection
100%.
that's
Absolutely. There's no question.
attributed
There's
or just
Yeah, I mean, there's no question because it's so usual for work by women to be kind of like tucked into the oeuvre of male painters for every reason, but especially economic, because those works have much higher valuation on the market. When I was a grad student in the 90s, there was a portrait at the Fogg Museum at Harvard, the portrait of, sorry, I can't remember. Oh, Dublin-Tournelle, who was an actor. And it was believed to be by David. It was acquired as by David, and it was later attributed to Labille-Guiard. So I
much to
think there's no
their
question,
dismay.
especially much to their dismay. Maybe not now, but yeah, probably. So that's the thing. Like, if you're the institution or you're the owner, you don't want this reattribution to happen. So it makes it difficult. But there's no question, and especially pastels. There's so many unsigned pastels that are just like portrait of a woman, portrait of a man, whatever. I mean, it's going to be difficult, but I think it will definitely happen. There was this Marie Gabrielle Capet that surfaced in the 90s, a kind of one of her students, major painting that's in Germany now. So I think there's no question. I am much more fascinated by the fact that Labille-Guiard does multiple pastels and portraits of male artists and members of the Académie Royale, of Vincent. And Vincent, we don't have a single, not even sketch of her by him, and no artworks of Labille-Guiard by any of these male artists. And that I find pretty interesting. And I suspect there are, and those are probably just titled Portrait of a Woman. And those may be discovered to be her, maybe.
it's time for curators to take stock of what they have. I
Yeah,
did find a painting in
I remember.
in Limoges in the permanent collection. It's just been in storage forever by
Right.
Emily Charmy, and this is an artist that I've written about. And the grandson had never seen the painting. No one had ever seen the painting before, and it's
Right.
still in storage.
Right. Well, this is the thing, that the vast majority of work that is owned by museums of women, historical women painters, are in storage and not on view. I mean, it's slowly changing, but it's not really changing that much, especially places like the Louvre.
It seems to me, this might be shifting the conversation too much, but it seems like it's changing. I've seen a big shift in modern art collections where they're really
Oh, for sure.
work by women, but less of a change in kind of the 19th, 18th century
And
collections.
before, I don't know if people have seen the news today, but the Legion of Honor in San Francisco just acquired a Lavinia Fontana, amazing painting.
Wow.
So there are, I mean, that's a Renaissance painter. Like, there's a lot of work out there. But that's what we're discovering, right? That we've had these kind of goggles on and we see what we're looking for. But as soon as we take them off, we realize, oh, there's actually all this work. There's work by people of color in Europe, works of people of color in Europe, works by women in Europe, in the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th century. And it's a really exciting time for those things. And it's an exciting time also for male artists who were just outside of whatever category was being funneled. I mean, you have a few like Blake or Rousseau that are kind of like allowed to percolate up, but there's a lot of amazing work out there. It's exciting.
It is very exciting.
That's what I think, anyways. Does anyone have questions that they want to just ask rather than pick them up? Or maybe it's time to go. I don't know. Up to you.
Wondering really super quick. I've worked in pastels and they're so fragile.
That's
And
the other thing.
my teacher offers, well, she always says, we can spray it, but it's going to change the color. So I just wondered when you were looking at these old pastels, what were they doing to take care of them?
That's such a great question, because that's why I've almost never seen any pastel of hers, because they're almost always in storage. Pastels are almost never lent for that reason, right? Because travel is so dangerous. And they're very often only displayed very irregularly and usually in low light. These were behind glass. I have no idea what the conservation process is. But that's exactly, if you are an artist where much of your oeuvre was pastel, which it was for Labille-Guiard and many women artists, especially, it was kind of an allowed medium, because it's not smelly and it's not staining and doesn't take up too much space, all these things, then yeah, your chances of surviving history just there alone are not good. I mean, oil on canvas
Thank
is
you.
amazing, right?
Right. I was just wondering about that. Oil and canvas, you don't even have to put glass on it. Right.
Right, and you can
And
roll it
it's
up
going
and
to,
put it in a
right.
bunker, and somehow they
Right,
still
exactly,
survive.
and carry it you can do like Da Vinci did, and carry it on your donkey or whatever, wherever he
Exactly,
went. But,
exactly.
pastel, I mean, you pick it up and it's, the stuff starts, and I'll bet you anything, even if it's a couple 100 years old, you might still be able to smear it. I was just wondering, but you said that you looked at some.
I mean, did you know those were gonna be there, Lauren? I was absolutely bowled over when
Yeah,
they got us in
that
there.
was
I
really
was like,
an incredible surprise that
yeah,
they allowed us to see those works, that they pulled that from storage for us.
yeah,
It was unbelievable. That
incredible.
was a lot of correspondence back and forth to make that day happen. It was so worth it. And just brilliant that
That was
they
all Lauren.
well, I've had to do these research trips myself, so I kind of like know the formalities that like get you in the door. But it was so worth it. And well, they were those pastels, they were lying flat, they were framed. Um, so yeah, but I'd like to know more about the conservation behind
I mean,
on
there
paper.
are also, because Michelle says, I work in art conservation and pastels and contemporary oil sticks never dry 100%. Like that's interesting, right? Um, and like someone like Rosalba Carriera, we do have a lot of her works and I think they're all pastel. So it just depends, I guess. I mean, one of the things that I used to say to students is like, if you really want something to last in history, don't make it out of that precious metal. That's like the worst way. Like, yes, gold will last forever, but it won't last the way you made it for sure. Because if anything can be melted down or made into a weapon or whatever, you know, like that's what's going to happen. So there is something maybe a little bit safe. There's some safety in it being such a humble material in some ways, possibly.
And maybe deemed a feminine material. Was it deemed so in
Totally.
the 18th
Oh
century?
yeah. I
Soft.
mean, that's the, well, 18th century French, I mean, of course, they completely embraced pastel, and there are many, many male masters, Lyotard and Quentin de la Tour. Oh, let's see, they're always stored unframed or should be unframed. The oils in the pastels and the glass or plexi can off gas. Oh yeah, that makes sense. And change the structure of materials. So interesting. Yeah, I mean, there are there's whole curatorial departments and conservation departments that are just works on paper. It's a massive, massive undertaking. Um, and I forgot what I was saying. Oh, that French artists, male and female, you know, take up pastel as an important medium. There's no question about that. But you know, in the 19th century, kind of one of the revivals of pastel that happens with the Impressionists is basically a willingness to go back to this effeminate, like they're flying in the face of what was acceptable academic media. So you know, anything that's tinged with the feminine is um, not going to have the same weight in the history of art, whether it's embroidery or pastel or
Lawrence taught us that a lot. Um, are there
yeah.
any sketches or watercolors of the huge history painting that was burned of hers? Do we have any idea?
Yes, there is a and please correct me if you're an artist and you know and I'm using incorrect terms, but there is a kind of modello, like an oil sketch of the painting or of the history painting. And that, but she was forced to burn everything. So when the tribunals tells her you have to, you need to bring the canvas just to burn. They also say you need to bring the canvas and all accompanying sketches, studies, hold all around Paris doing portraits of the people that were going to be in the painting. So this, when the burning of the history painting is the burning of multiple dozens of works, but for some reason this one modello survives. But it is very sketchy. It's really just a kind of cartoon of the layout of like where things would be, and it's not super impressive. It looks very much like you know, maybe one of David's paintings of Napoleon inside the church being crowned. You know, it's like the Comte de Provence on an altar wearing some crazy robe thing, and someone kneeling gonna pin something on his ermine. You know, it's like you've seen it. It's not exciting. I don't know if the painting itself would have ended up being great or not. Who knows? But it definitely shows you that it was going to be huge. I mean, it's a soaring interior, columns, dozens and dozens of figures, lush materials and fabrics. Um, I can't imagine watching your work burn and people laughing and singing songs while it's happening. That would kind of suck.
Her illness was probably heart sickness.
Yeah, that's what Le Breton says, but that's what killed her. Can heart sickness kill you? Maybe it can, you know? While we're talking, my friend Bill is on screen. He is a sculptor and artist in California, and behind him is a painting of someone celebrating a bonfire. So my eyes keep.
It's my sister's
Please.
painting.
Yeah, yeah.
My sister
It's a kiddie
is an
pool
artist.
on fire.
Yep.
Yeah. But it's very apt for our talk. anyone else?
I would
Well,
just say I love like the way you write, the way you express the story and your passion for this artist. And I hope you're going to do like book readings around, because I think you have like a wonderful voice, and it just feels like it's like very poetic. I don't know. It was really beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
So thank you for sharing.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me, and
very
thank you for
much.
coming. Where can we buy your book? Well, you can buy it anywhere you can buy books, online or in person, or request it. Let's see. Can I send them a link? Oh, Bill has his book. Thank you, Bill. And if you're interested, if you want a book plate, like for me to sign something, I'm happy to send it to you. I also have postcards I can send to put in the book. So if you send Lauren your address, I'll send you something to put in the book, if you're interested in that.
I will go ahead and put the link. Oh God, that's a very long link.
I have a link. Hold on. I have a link that goes to like everything everywhere you'd
Oh,
ever
good. Like a
want
link
to.
tree.
Yeah, kind of. Hold on. It's just going to take me a second. Chat among yourselves, if you will. Is it not going to let me go? Maybe it's not. Oh, there we go.
Lauren, who is going to Portugal with you, or who are you taking to Portugal with you?
Well, a lovely group of 6 women are coming in about 10 days. So this will be a very exciting adventure through the art and crafts of Portugal. So really looking forward to that. And yes, eventually, Bridget Quinn and I have plans eventually to co-lead a trip. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Mhm.
Hold on, I'm still trying to make this work. The reason I'm having trouble
The Adelaide
because
lost the missing picture that can't be, that Bridget hasn't seen yet.
Yeah.
Yes, let's do that.
Yeah, let's go.
Yes, please. I had a difficulty getting the link because I block myself from almost every site on the internet between 10 and 4
Wow.
because I have to, so that I can write and not get distracted by my own worst impulses. Okay, here we go. Which include reading the New York Times, getting on Instagram, whatever. Okay, here is a link for anything you would ever want. Amazon, bookshop.org, foreign places, by which I mean not in the United States. I don't know if you know what Bookshop is. Bookshop is like an Amazon for independent bookstores. So they pool their resources. So you can basically buy from bookshop.org and say, I want this purchase to go to my, tattered cover in Salem, Oregon, or whatever it is. Thank you. Thank you for having me, everyone.
Yes. So
Are we done? Okay.
please pick up your copy of Portrait of a Woman and absolutely share your thoughts. You can also write reviews of the book.
Oh, yes.
On Amazon.
Yeah, if anyone is willing to, I mean, you don't have to write a long review. You can even just leave stars and say liked it, didn't like it, whatever. And it's just all of these things drive the algorithm for books to bring it to the attention of other people. So yeah, if anyone is willing to do that, I would be so grateful. That would be fantastic.
You can do that on Amazon, on Goodreads, on a bunch of different sites where books.
And also, you don't have to buy a book to support an author. If you request the book from your local library, that's a huge help.
Yes. make sure your library has the book, your university has
everyone.
the book.
And there is going to be an audiobook. It's still being produced, so it's not out yet, but it is coming.
Amazing. Oh, that's what I want to hear. I'm excited for that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing
Thank you. Thanks so much.
story, your research.
Thank you. It was so nice to be here.
Bridget, will you be reading the audio? I do a lot of audiobooks now.
I'm not sure. I doubt it.
Oh,
I
okay.
read the audio for She Votes, but it was because it was, which is my second book, because it was during COVID. I think they were like, just let's get it done. But I think that they prefer to hire professional voice actors who can be really good. I hope they can pronounce French names though, because there are so many and there's so many characters and they all have 3 names at least.
Well, just
Thank you for coming, Michelle. It
Just
was so good to see
listening to
you.
your lecture,
Thank
you know,
you.
your enthusiasm was so infectious. And, you know, I didn't know anything about this artist, but it, you know, your enthusiasm is so infectious. And then when you think about it, you know, it makes me wonder, your quest to find her final resting place, is that still an objective?
Well, I think I found it.
Oh.
And I believe that she's in the catacombs.
Oh, okay.
So, which means unmarked and mixed with other bodies. So, but you never know. I could something could turn up tomorrow. Which I hope it does. You know, they have found the graves of many people that they thought were lost. Zora Neale Hurston, Alice Walker found her grave. Edmonia Lewis, the artist, her grave was discovered in London just a few years ago. I feel like there was someone else recently. So it's certainly possible. I hope they do. It would be fantastic. It would be amazing. I mean, it's so indicative of Labille-Guiard's life, though, that if she had lived one more year, she would have been buried at Père Lachaise. It was opened in 1804 and she dies in 1803. So it's kind of emblematic of her life and legacy in many ways.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks
Bye.
again, Bridget. This was amazing.
Thank you. It was great to see
Thanks.
everyone. Thank you everyone for coming. Bye.
Bye.